So, have you ever had to terminate an employee, or maybe somebody just quit and they said they're going to sue you, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, did I do everything right? Did I document everything correctly? Am I going to get sued? Well, I have those conversations a lot. In this video, I want to talk about the primary, insurance coverage that we use to cover those lawsuits when they come in. And I wrote it on the board here. Commonly, it's referred to EPLI, or Employment Practices Liability Insurance. I do think there's other organizations that call it something different, but primarily it's going to be called EPLI. I want to cover in this video what it covers, what types of things are going to trigger coverage for this type of policy, and talk about some of the nuances to it. I'm not going to get too deep into it because honestly, it's a rabbit hole. This is relatively newer coverage, relatively meaning not as old as like general liability, but it does differ a lot from carrier to carrier. And so I would say always look to your policy to understand exactly what's covered and what's not covered. But generally speaking, EPLI is going to cover these three things. So first, a breach of an employment contract. And keep in mind, it does not have to be a written contract. It can be an expressed contract, an implied contract, where an employee believes they negotiated certain terms of employment, but the employer had a different understanding of it. And so now there's this miscommunication, and there could be a lawsuit from it. Covered under the first bullet point here. Second, and most common, I would say, is the violation of state or federal employment statute. So this can be a lot of things. It could be violation of FMLA. It could be non-compliance with ADA, whatever it is. Different states have different rules, so that's important to understand. As again, nuance to policies, there may be certain state laws or specific state laws that are not covered or covered in different jurisdictions. So understand that, but generally speaking, this is another thing that EPLI covers. And then finally have this kind of catch-all of a workplace tort. So things that aren't necessarily illegal, but are definitely, or could lead to a lawsuit. So think like creating a toxic work environment, right? Like if an employee quits and alleges that they were kind of railroaded out because management didn't want them there, and and so they treated them poorly, that's not necessarily illegal, but it may be grounds for damages. So that's just one example where that could come into play. So important things to understand about EPLI at a high level. One, it's duty to defend. So, if you turn this claim in and want it covered by EPL, keep in mind, they're going to assign a labor attorney to defend the case. So a lot of people have their own employment attorneys on retainer and stuff like that. You can ask, but a lot of times they're going to have pre-negotiated rates, pre-negotiated firms already lined up to handle those claims. So sometimes that is not, doesn't make people comfortable. They would prefer to have their regular person handle it. But unfortunately, if you turn it over, they're going to assign who they see fit. You can request that it be your person, and maybe they say yes, but most of the time they don't. The second thing is these are extremely frustrating and emotional circumstances. Usually the employer, in my experience, employers don't obviously intentionally try and do the wrong thing, but and then somebody still accuses them of that. So the accusatory nature of this, it's very personal. Usually there's at least some level of relationship there where, you worked with this person or interviewed this person or whatever. And so they're highly, highly emotional cases. They're very frustrating. My opinion, sometimes it's better to turn it over to them just for that fact alone, because I've seen a lot of organizations try and say like, well, we didn't do this, so we're going to defend it. If you turn it over to the insurance company, there's a very good chance they're going to settle it. Just very good. A lot of these are settlement chasing cases where they're not really trying to get their full amount that they're alleging. They're just trying to get a higher number. And that can be very frustrating because a settlement to some folks will seem like what's the word I'm looking for? An admission of guilt. So it can be kind of frustrating. So the other thing is you run into more often than not in EPL. I guess you see it a lot. You can see it a lot in D&O as well, where there's a duty to defend. So they'll cover the defense costs. They'll assign an attorney. They'll do those things. But the damages, if awarded to the plaintiff, the person bringing the suit, if those damages may not be covered. So you may have defense costs covered, but you may not have damages covered. So I'm not going to get too deep into that because it's such a nuanced conversation, but just realize it happens more in EPL than it does in something like general liability or auto or something like that. So I hope this is helpful. I highly recommend having at least $100,000 in EPL if you're a small organization. I would say most organizations, once you cross that 50 mark, I would probably recommend you bump up to $1 million. That's pretty normal, but I mean, again, industry does confine the limits available a little bit and whatnot. So thank you very much for watching this. If you have any questions, I'm happy to talk more about this, and take care. Have a good rest of your week.